Hi everybody, I'm Scrapped, and after a long wait, the new update for the game has finally arrived, Realm Divided, a rework to the faction warfare content in the game. The progression of the faction war has changed, with new things to fight for, new objectives, and a new redistribution of the game map. Eventually, I'll make a detailed video about the new faction warfare, but today I'll just give you the briefing notes, because we actually have to talk about everything that was changed or introduced with this update. And buckle up, because the list of changes is huge. It's not just any new patch, it's an entire new update. So welcome everybody to the Realm Divided update, and let's get right into it. Like I said before, I'll skip the complete explanation of the new faction warfare and save that for another video. But in a nutshell, these are the new changes. Now, the map of the game has a new segmentation, and it's divided in 20 provinces. You have to collect points by fighting. Then later in the day, if you have more points than the enemy, you can begin the attack on the enemy's faction fortress. And if you conquer it, you capture the whole province. You can now fast travel to where the battle is in the faction warfare. Almost all of the changes that I'll cover today were made with the faction war content in mind. So right now is an excellent time to jump back into the game. Following these changes, the developers also made some adjustments to the faction mounts. All the saddle and elite faction mounts are getting new passive abilities, and also some adjustments to the mount spells. There are new vanity items. The faction soldier set is available to buy from the faction commander in each royal city. We also got a couple of UI changes. The marketplace now displays the estimated sale value after repairs of damaged items. Exit icons on region maps are now clickable, and double-clicking the region map now pings the location. Those two should have always been in the game, to be honest. The refining UI now displays a refine button instead of a craft button. Static Dungeons entrance tooltips now display recommended group sizes. We can now combine Tomes of Insight into higher tiers at the Artifact Foundry. They added new categorizing faction types to the report system. There's a new repair station outside the Mist Portal in Brazilian. Tier 3 static dungeons no longer have events and no longer upgrade. And finally, the Season 28 winner statues have been unveiled in Conqueror's Hall. So congratulations to Vivas for dominating this season. And now it's time for the combat changes introduced in the Realm Divided update. The Astral Staff. The resilience penetration while channeling was reduced to 20%. In the same amount as the majority of the melee weapons and melee transformations in this patch. More on that later. The Crystal Reaper. The dash and stand time on Relentless Assault was reduced a bit, to make the combat feel smoother. But since it was being too performant in group PvE, the damage against mobs was reduced. The Great Axe. This weapon is regaining the bonus movement speed during the channel, but now it will only apply the buff if you are actively hitting enemies. The Wailing Bow. Since this bow had poor PvE compared to other bows, they changed the damage of this weapon. Now it will deal the maximum player damage to any mob hit, and hitting mobs will still count for escalating the player damage values. The Bow of Baron. They acknowledged that this weapon was a bit too strong, both in solo PvP and even CVC clapping, so the damage per tick is being slightly reduced. The Crossbows. The crossbows are gaining a new... What? A new W spell to improve the early game PvE, and also to provide more options for crossbow players across all content. This is how it works. The new ability is called Explosive Salvo, and it launches a salvo of explosive bolts at the targeted position, dealing damage in an area. It also creates corrosive fumes for 3.5 seconds, and those fumes decrease the enemy's damage resistances. This new ability is like an AoE Thundershot, which should come in handy in many situations. And because it's a new spell, they adjusted the spell unlock order. So now you're gonna start with Autofire, Explosive Bolt, and Explosive Salvo. Also, another unrelated crossbow change, the Vicious Barrage on the Siege Bow has been a powerful offensive option. So we're buffing that shit. Now you get 33% defense against players and mobs while challenging. The Curse Staffs. The damage dealt by the Curse Beam when it consumes stacks is getting increased. All daggers. The daggers will no longer be able to chain a fourth target with the Chain Slash ability. Now your third target chained will receive a huge burst of damage, and that should help dagger players enable kills in group fights. All maces. The Ground Shaker ability is trading some crowd control in favor of some damage to help PvE and Bruiser playstyles. And the Guard Rune ability was way too powerful as an all-in-one defensive option in large group content, so the resistances increase that ability gives have been reduced. The Dreadstorm Monarch. The ability casts are being slightly sped up to increase the smoothness of the abilities. All Quarterstaffs. Since they took away the movement speed bonus on hit from the cartwheel ability, they are increasing the resistances gained, because they want this weapon to be used as an option for group scale tanks in PvP. They are also removing the stacking cooldown refund mechanic from Whirling Strikes to increase its consistency in PvP. The Shapeshifter Staffs. They are finally addressing the light color allegations. This weapon has popped up as a powerhouse in the mists. The mobility potential is just too strong, so now the move speed bonus from the airborne passive will be removed after transforming back into a human. So light color players will have to choose between staying in the squishy downbeat transformation with elevated movement speed, or forgo the extra movement speed and go back to their human form with more armor bonuses. Okay, I need to change the music, but I can't think of a cool transition to do it. Wait, what if this is the transition? Yeah, some Inception type shit.
I'm a genius!
All spears! The attack speed reduction from the Cripple's ability is being replaced. Now the debuff is going to be a reduction to all damage types, which means instead of a slower attack speed, it's getting decreased all damage. All swords! Okay, buckle up, because we have some huge changes here. The hamstring ability is getting a large power increase to make it stand out as a viable soft crowd control tool with optional extra mobility. That means the first cast damage was increased, and the max range of the second cast was increased. The cooldowns were adjusted, and the second cast no longer requires or consumes one heroic charge. Pretty nice buff for all sword players. But that's not all. The move speed buff duration from Heroic Strike is getting increased, to make it so it doesn't require every Q to be cast on cooldown and thus keeping a consistent movement speed. And finally, the Splitting Slash is getting an increase to the duration of the root, to make it stand out as a supportive crowd control option in group fights, or as a tool to further control 1v1 spacing. The Claymore. After all of those buffs to the swords in the game, the Claymore is getting a buff of its own. The range and stand time of the charge ability have been increased and reduced respectively. And the final change to the swords goes to the Infinity Blade. And now you can interrupt the Limit Breaker ability, which is an uninterruptible channel that gives you a ton of movement speed and a ton of damage. Okay, I see the issue. But be careful, because if you interrupted Reach Limits, which is the first part of the ability, Limit Breaker will still be available to use. The Soldier Helmet. The cooldown of block is getting increased to 40 seconds, to reduce its uptime because it's a too powerful defensive. The Demon Helm. Hutch is being reworked into a missable, dodgeable spell. It's supposed to provide use in group fights while also giving opponents a chance to react to the ability. The Cleric Cowl. You can no longer receive healing while channeling the Ice Block, so you better time that ability correctly. The Jacket of Tenacity. The dynamic defense ability is getting a pretty big buff. The resistance increase is getting increased to act as a more powerful defensive option in some specific scenarios. The Mistwalker Jacket. The full immunity of this armor is very powerful, with not too many counterplay options. So to balance it out, the self-slow strength was increased from 20% to 30%. The Druid Sandals. The Frostwalk ability is no longer interacting with slow effect diminishing returns. So now the rules for the Druid Sandals are really simple. Are you on the frost path? You get slowed. You got out of the frost path? You are no longer slowed. Easy. The Sandals of Purity. You must have seen at least one player zooming through the fight, getting in and out of the battle with the hover ability. So now the movement speed of that ability is being reduced, to give opponents a better chance of catching up. The Marlock Cape. This one has been mostly replaced by the Smuggler's Cape as the go-to defensive option. And it kinda makes sense. You can double giant potion yourself, double healing, so in order to make the Marlock Cape more attractive, they are giving it a significant change. The defense buff of this cape is no longer purchable, and also the base cooldown was increased 20 seconds and the cooldown reduction per 100 item power was increased. And that, everybody, it's not all, because we still have one last thing to talk about. But in order to do so, first I need to talk to you about resilience and resilience penetration. Resilience is a mechanic in the game intended to limit the effectiveness of multiple opponents attacking one single target. Basically, if you are by yourself in the open world and an entire party of gankers is coming for you, those gankers are going to deal less damage to you depending on how many they are. And on the other hand, resilience penetration is a stat that some weapons and abilities have, and it means that the damage can bypass resilience up to a certain percentage. So you might be asking, what changed in this update? Well, first, the resilience penetration of all melee weapons was reduced. All of them are losing 10% of resilience penetration, except for the battle bracers, because they are losing 15%. And the resilience overall is also getting some changes. The large-scale CVC meta sees an overwhelming preference for melee weapons, and it obviously has to do with the high resilience penetration. That's why melee players are the main Zerg damage dealers. So, to combat this, in addition to reducing the resilience penetration, the devs are slightly reducing the strength of resilience itself. That way, the nerf to the swords gets balanced, and it changes the fight dynamic a little bit, benefiting ranged weapons over melee weapons. In simple terms, in big-scale CVC fights, melee weapons will deal a tiny bit less damage, and ranged weapons are going to deal a lot more damage. And that is all I had for you today. Thank you so much for watching until the end, and sorry for the lack of uploads, everybody. I kind of blacked out for a month and just woke up, but I promise you though, I'll bring more videos, more fun, more lies. Follow me on Twitch, join my Discord server, my name is Crab, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.